Hello, how are you? I only got two, I think, about the Russian-Ukraine. Russian-Ukraine. Okay, here we go. You know, what happened? Go like this.
Russia-Ukraine war live. Zelenskyy insists on truce as Putin offers talks.
Oh, Jesus Christ.
Russia-Ukraine war news. Al Jazeera. 9 updates. Auto update.
Here we go.
Russia-Ukraine war live. Zelenskyy insists on truce as Putin offers talks. Russia-Ukraine war news. Al Jazeera. 9 updates. Auto updates. Trump raises hopes for Ukraine peace after Putin offers direct talks. U.S. President Donald Trump has made a hopeful comment about the prospects for peace between Russia and Ukraine following Putin's proposal for direct talks. A potentially great day for Russia in Ukraine, Trump posted on his Truth social platform, without specifying what he was referring to. Think of the hundreds of thousands of lives that will be saved as this never-ending bloodbath hopefully comes to an end, he said. I will continue to work with both sides to make sure that it happens. Proposed talks create genuine peace opening. Putin's proposal for direct talks with Ukraine is a genuine opening for peace, even if it's also a strategic move to shift blame onto Kyiv and win favor with the U.S., says Anatol Levin, director of the Eurasia program at the Quincy Institute for Responsible Statecraft, a U.S. think tank. Sooner or later, if there's going to be peace, Putin and Russia have to agree on the terms, Levin told Al Jazeera. But it's also an attempt, of course, to put the blame on the Ukrainians, who have previously rejected direct talks with Russia. Both sides are maneuvering to try to throw blame on the other, he added, noting that it remains unclear whether Ukraine will agree to talks, or what Russia's conditions will be. Russia accuses Ukraine of targeting residential areas of Belgorod region. Ukrainian forces have carried out more than 100 attacks on the western Russian region of Belgorod in the past day, according to the region's governor, Vyacheslav Gladkov. The attacks consisted of drones and munitions, targeting about a dozen villages in the area, Gladkov said in a post on Telegram. Among those injured are a married couple who were driving on a highway near the settlement of Ziborivka, and a woman in the village of Yasny Zori. Watch, Ukraine and Europe call for 30-day ceasefire, US backs plan to hold war. Ukrainian and European leaders, meeting in Kyiv, have jointly called for an unconditional 30-day ceasefire aimed at ending the war. The initiative has gained strong backing from US President Donald Trump, who participated in the talks by phone. The leaders have warned of imposing massive new sanctions on Russia should it refuse to halt the fighting. Watch the report below. Ukraine reports dozens of Russian airstrikes in past 24 hours. In a post on Telegram, Ukraine's General Staff of the Armed Forces claims that Russia carried out dozens of airstrikes and thousands of rocket and drone attacks in the past day. The enemy carried out 63 airstrikes on the positions of Ukrainian units and settlements, dropped 96 guided bombs. In addition, it carried out more than 4,000 attacks, 85 of them from multiple rocket launcher systems, and used 2,470 kamikaze drones, the military report said. The attacks came as a Russian 72-hour ceasefire, which both sides said was not properly observed, ended at midnight. Ukraine's Zelenskyy says first step to ending Russia's war is ceasefire on Monday. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy says it is a positive sign that the Russians have begun to consider ending the war, but the first step towards that is to start a ceasefire on Monday. And the very first step in truly ending any war is a ceasefire, Zelenskyy said on X. There is no point in continuing the killing even for a single day. We expect Russia to confirm a ceasefire, full, lasting, and reliable, starting tomorrow, May 12th. Putin aide says peace talks will take into account 2022 draft deal, report. Former diplomat and Putin's aide, Yuri Ushakov, says proposed peace talks between Russia and Ukraine will take into account the situation on the ground as well as the negotiations of 2022, Interfax reports. Putin proposes direct talks in Istanbul on Thursday. Russian President Vladimir Putin has proposed direct talks with Ukraine in Istanbul on Thursday, without preconditions, to achieve lasting peace and eliminate the root causes of the 3-year conflict. The offer, delivered early on Sunday, came hours after the leaders of Ukraine, France, Germany, Poland and the United Kingdom called for an unconditional 30-day ceasefire. The leaders, who were meeting in Kyiv, said their call is backed by United States President Donald Trump and threatened massive, new sanctions on Moscow if it did not agree with their plan. Putin, however, rejected that proposal, slamming European ultimatums and anti-Russian rhetoric, before outlining the counter-proposal for Russia-Ukraine. Negotiations. We are proposing that Kyiv resume direct negotiations without any preconditions, the Russian president told reporters. We offer the Kyiv authorities a resumption of negotiations already on Thursday in Istanbul. Read more here. Sign up for Al Jazeera. Breaking news alert protected by reCAPTCHA. Welcome to our live coverage. Hello and welcome to our live coverage of the Russian-Ukraine war. Stay with Al Jazeera's live team for all the latest developments, analysis and reactions throughout the day. Source: Al Jazeera and news agencies.
Wow, I gotta get ceasefire. Have first ceasefire. Okay, I'm not very good because I'm in Australia. I'm in the mid sector. You gotta get ceasefire, and then the next thing is talk to the third party, to the thing for the third and the fourth and the fifth and the sixth to negotiate peace deal to stop this bloodshed. Okay, amigo. And they gotta talk together, Russian president with Ukrainian president, shake hands and no more fighting, and give the land that they got and the land that they give, and they give peace out.
Putin proposes direct Russia-Ukraine talks in Istanbul on May 15. Russia-Ukraine war news. Al Jazeera. Russian President Vladimir Putin has proposed direct talks with Ukraine in Istanbul on May 15. Without preconditions, to achieve lasting peace and eliminate the root causes of the 3-year conflict. The offer, delivered early on Sunday, came hours after the leaders of Ukraine, France, Germany, Poland and the United Kingdom called for an unconditional 30-day ceasefire. The leaders, who were meeting in Kyiv, said their call is backed by United States President Donald Trump and threatened massive, new sanctions on Moscow if it did not agree with their plan. Putin, however, rejected that proposal, slamming European ultimatums and anti-Russian rhetoric. Before outlining the counter-proposal for renewed Russia-Ukraine negotiations. We are proposing that Kyiv resume direct negotiations without any preconditions, the Russian president told reporters. We offer the Kyiv authorities to resume negotiations already on Thursday, in Istanbul. Putin said that he would speak to Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan later on Sunday about facilitating the talks. There was no immediate response from Ukraine to the proposal. Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelenskyy has previously said he was ready for peace talks, but only after a ceasefire is in place. Video player is loading. Current time 0:00. Duration 0:00. Remaining time 0:00. Beginning of dialog window. Escape will cancel and close the window. Text color opacity. Text background color opacity. Caption area background color opacity. Font size. Text edge style. Font family. End of dialog window. Video duration 2 minutes 32 seconds. Play arrow 232. Now playing. Now playing.
It was dubbed the Bravery Express, and as it pulled into Kyiv station, a powerful message rolled in with it. For the first time, the leaders of France, Germany, Poland, and the UK traveled together to Ukraine, an unmistakable sign of Western unity in the face of a war now dragging into its 4th year. Their message: the bloodshed must end, Ukraine's sovereignty must be protected, and Russia must stop blocking the path to peace. Or be ready for more sanctions.
We agreed that from Monday, May the 12th, a full and unconditional ceasefire should begin for at least 30 days. We together demand this from Russia.
Ukraine and its allies say a truce lasting weeks, not days, could mark a turning point in the war.
All of us here, together with the US, are calling Putin out. If he's serious about peace, then he has a chance to show it now by extending the V-Day pause.
Whoa, man, whoa, dude. Whoa, man, whoa, dude. Whoa.
It was dubbed the Bravery Express, and as it pulled into
Conditional 30-day ceasefire.
on the eve of the summit with the U.S. Embassy warning of a possible Russian air assault on Kyiv in the coming days, President Donald Trump had this message.
We're losing 5,000 soldiers a week, Russian and Ukrainian soldiers, and other people also, by the way. And I say, get this stupid war finished. That's my message for both of them.
As the war grinds on, diplomacy intensifies, but peace may not come easily, nor quickly. Russia's ambitions and Ukraine's defiance make the future uncertain.
I think the most likely outcome is that there will be a sovereign Ukraine with its capital in Kiev and with Odessa on the Black Sea. And strategically for Russia, that is a major loss, especially given the cost that they're paying for that.
As EU leaders arrived, Ukraine's military reported nearly 200 frontline attacks in a single day.
The conflict seems far from over, but Ukraine has already emerged as a battle-hardened fighting force. And whatever the outcome of the war, EU leaders now consider this country a cornerstone of European security. Zain Basravi, Al Jazeera, Kyiv.
It's time for Hayat to have
Whoa.
her wounds treated and her bandages.
Whoa. Not like this, amigo. Like this. Copy that shit. Debra.
I'm Michael Smerconish in Philadelphia. We have international breaking news. First out of Kyiv, President Zelenskyy and European leaders are calling for a 30-day truce with Russia starting on...
30 days. It's gonna be 30 days, motherfucker. Motherfucker, yeah. Fuck yeah.
Monday, and we've also just learned of a ceasefire between Pakistan and India. CNN international diplomatic editor Nick Robertson is in Islamabad. CNN chief global affairs correspondent Matthew Chance is in New Delhi, India. And CNN chief international security correspondent Nick Payton Walsh is in Kyiv. We'll start with Nick Payton Walsh in Kyiv. Nick, tell us how this all unfolded.
Important to stress, this is a seismic moment in the largest land war in Europe since the 40s. Four of the largest economies, militaries in Europe, France, Germany, UK and Poland, their leaders have come here, their significant and risky journey to Kiev to stand alongside Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelenskyy, to say to him, alongside him, that they will declare from midnight, we think from Sunday into Monday, a 30-day unconditional ceasefire. And they expect Russia to honor that. They have said they have the backing of US President Donald Trump. Indeed, a picture was posted by a senior Ukrainian official of those four men around a telephone with the phrase historic moment, and they confirmed they rang Trump after they'd had their meeting to set out this particular proposal. Well, if Russia does not agree to, the European leaders were clear they have American backing as well for what French President Emmanuel Macron called, quote, massive sanctions against Russia. That could potentially, said Zelenskyy, involve the banking sector, energy infrastructure as well. But I should point out we're into an extraordinary just over 30 hours now from this public announcement into which Ukraine now must manage what its armed forces do, striking midnight Sunday into Monday, whether they fight back in self-defense or have to lay down arms for a specific period of time. We also are hearing that the United States is going to be assisting, if not partially in control of the monitoring of this ceasefire, so they'll have to upscale that capability exceptionally quickly with great quality and quantity to cover the hundreds of kilometers of front line that's exceptionally violent at the moment. So a lot to do till, but also most importantly, they have to hear from Moscow, who in the past have said that they would potentially support this in theory, but they wanted certain nuances to be answered. That really was called out today by these European leaders as a form of procrastination. They essentially want an answer now, or there will be consequences. But here's what Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelenskyy had to say.
We've agreed that since Monday, 12th of May, a full and unconditional ceasefire must start for at least 30 days. We together demanded from Russia. We know that the United States support us in this. The unconditional ceasefire means no conditions. An attempt to put any conditions is signaling intention to drag out the war and undermine diplomacy.
It's an exceptionally high-stakes moment. I should remind people that we are, in theory, still in the middle of a Russian unilateral ceasefire, which they declared, their critics say, to essentially make the victory parade we saw on Friday in Moscow go more smoothly. Ukraine says that's been violated hundreds of times. We've seen some of it ourselves near the front lines. That essentially, that ceasefire will be extended by this 30-day proposal to which Russia has yet to clearly respond in any particular way. Look, ultimately, I think this is a way of trying for the Europeans to seize the initiative here, to be sure they don't lose the attention or focus or passion of the White House in trying to get a peace here. Trump is on board this particular initiative, and potentially indeed, if it does fall apart, like some critics of Russia's military policy here say, there are many suggestions they are simply reinforcing and building up for future offensives rather than contemplating slowing things down. That will at least be clear in terms of evidence for the Trump administration. But an exceptionally high stakes moment here for this war. They're calling a very short time frame for something that really hasn't been attempted before. A lot of political onus on these European leaders now. They're promising significant assistance for Ukraine if Russia does indeed violate this. And we're into a new chapter in this now 3-year war. Michael?
Nick Payton Walsh, thank you for the report from Kyiv. Our fingers are crossed. Let's go now to Nick Robertson in Islamabad. Nick, what's the latest?
Yeah, I was just talking to a source who was literally in the room where it happened, where Secretary of State Marco Rubio, I was told, played a massive role in bringing about this ceasefire, a ceasefire that on multiple times today and even yesterday, because it was in the works yesterday, perhaps over the last 48 hours, as we've been reporting, Pakistan was sort of on a military pause to give a window for diplomacy. What I understand from this source is that that was blown out of the window early this morning when India attacked 3 air bases, one of them here in the capital, just on the outskirts of the capital. That, according to the source, Pakistan responded with a relentless, a massive barrage of missiles and rockets, they say, Pakistan says, into Indian military facilities, bases inside India, air bases, weapons storage, and along that disputed line of control in Kashmir against military bases there. They say that this, from the Pakistan perspective, their communications, how they were communicating with Secretary Rubio, that really put India on the back foot. It didn't know what had happened. India, according to Pakistan, reached out to Secretary Rubio, reached out to the Saudis, reached out to the Turks, reached out to others to find a diplomatic off-ramp, got engaged after that onslaught in diplomacy, but telling the mediators that they were going to go on a pause on the Indian side. And then according to Pakistan, that didn't happen. There was another exchange of rocket fire. That happened several times during the day today. And it was only in the last couple of hours before this ceasefire came into effect just about an hour or so ago that there was enough of a pause to call it and say that this was real, that enough diplomacy and leverage had been put on both sides to get them to stop here. Now, the key issue for Pakistan going forward is water. India has still said it's cut off the water from those three vital rivers from the mountains in Kashmir, vital to Pakistan, existential to Pakistan. I said, what about that? And the source said, look, this is a ceasefire. Everything works out from there. But from the Pakistan perspective, they've been up all night. From the Indian perspective, they've been up all night. There was a lot of tiredness. There was a sense that they just wanted to get this done. Otherwise, in the words of this source, it would have just spiraled into something much worse. It was now or never, if you will. It was going to get a whole lot worse. So I think a sense of relief here, but a sense of whiplash too, for what the country's been through in the past few days.
Nick Robertson, thank you for the report from Islamabad. Now we go to India. In New Delhi is CNN's Matthew Chance. Matthew?
Yeah, hey, Michael. Sorry, having a few technical problems here. Must be the conflict. But look, I mean, it's an astonishing couple of hours, actually, because I was listening to Nick Patton Walsh speak out of Ukraine there about the proposal for a ceasefire there. That's been, or the demand for a ceasefire, that's been very long in coming. It's been more than 3.5 years since the Ukraine war began. And of course, you know, to take a skeptical view, as Nick was pointing out, the Russians have not yet agreed to a ceasefire. But over here on the Indian subcontinent, with this standoff between India and Pakistan, it's not 3.5 years. This latest conflict's only been going on for 3.5 days. And so what Trump has got in his sudden, unexpected announcement of a ceasefire between the two countries is the quick victory that he very much wanted to have but couldn't get with Russia and Ukraine as well. But nevertheless, over the past couple of hours, less than that even, President Trump announcing on his Truth social media platform that a ceasefire has been done between India and Pakistan. That follows a real upsurge in violence between the two nuclear-armed neighbours. Remember, early this morning, India launched unprecedentedly deep attacks inside Pakistan, airstrikes on Pakistani military bases, the deepest inside the country that India has struck for decades, really, since the war between the two countries back in 1971. So extremely serious escalation there that led to a furious Pakistani response. They struck dozens of targets, not just in the disputed territory of Kashmir, but elsewhere in India as well. And, the fact that this was taking place between these two nuclear-armed neighbours, I think, shook the international community and shook the United States in particular into action and basically forced diplomats from Washington to really get engaged and to bring the two sides together to get them to step back from the brink. Remember, it was only a couple of days ago that J.D. Vance, US Vice President, was saying that dispute between India and Pakistan, it's none of our business. Those were the words he literally said. And what we now understand from the Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, is that actually there's been a day of intensive negotiations involving him and J.D. Vance speaking to the leadership and the military leaders on both sides of the divide in India and Pakistan, finally getting them to talk and to agree to step back from the brink. Now, there's going to be more talks to finalise this ceasefire, but, it seems that for the moment, the threat of a spiralling, escalating conflict between these two countries, India and Pakistan, thankfully has receded, Michael.
Matthew Chance, thank you for the report from New Delhi. Joining me now to react to all of this breaking news, CNN senior military analyst Admiral James Stavridis, former Supreme Allied Commander of NATO, partner at the Carlyle Group, a global investment firm. He's also an accomplished author. His latest achievement, The Admiral's Bookshelf. Admiral Stavridis, can I say at the outset, it's a day like today that makes me appreciate CNN because of the footprint and the ability to so quickly go from Kyiv to Islamabad to New Delhi and to cover all of this, dare I say, very promising breaking news. Can we begin with Ukraine and Russia and talk about the prospect of what Moscow will now do?
Let's just stop for a minute and say how rare is it you and I both show up with smiles on our face to talk about the international system.
It's true.
And up front, I would score this as positives for the Trump administration, who have put pressure in both these situations, evidently, according to recent reporting. In terms of your question, I think with 70% likelihood, the pressure is now truly on Moscow for the first time since the Trump administration came into office. And I think Putin is realizing his strategy is simply playing rope-a-dope back and forth, is not going to work. The 30% that makes me less encouraged is the fact that Putin is coming off a big deal 4-day visit with President Xi. Could we now be seeing Russia, China align with the United States and Europe align, turning Ukraine into perhaps the ultimate proxy war between those two sides? Let's hope not. And let's be hopeful on this morning that Putin will wake up and smell the tea, so to speak, and take this ceasefire deal.
We all remember that Oval Office meeting between President Zelenskyy and President Trump and J.D. Vance, the Vice President of the United States, and how that all turned out. The perception of many was that President Trump had been heavy-handed with President Zelenskyy, so too J.D. Vance. But in the reporting today, it seems as if the administration, the Trump administration, is sending a very deliberate message to Moscow to say to Putin, we're on board with the EU and with Ukraine. The ball's in your court. But if you don't take this deal now, there will be repercussions.
That's exactly right. And that would be additional sanctions, possibly secondary sanctions, putting sanctions on anybody who even does business with Russia. All that could have a crippling effect ultimately on a Russian economy that's already simply on a war footing. So there are levers, there are cards to play. I'm glad to see the Trump administration using them. And final thought here, Michael, I think Putin, his military losses of troops are also going to be a factor in this thing. And last thought, look at the pictures of those European leaders kind of coming together. This is a good moment for Europe and its unity. That's a good thing for the United States as well.
A final thought, Admiral Stavridis. One conflict that we're discussing is 3.5 years old. The other is only 3.5 days old. But I know from reading your recent piece at Bloomberg, you had some very serious concerns of the escalating situation between Pakistan and India. Speak to that, please.
History was on our side here. India and Pakistan have gone to war with troops and tanks and border crossings 4 times in 50 years. They've had a whole series of these kind of back and forth military events, even in the last 10 or so years. They've always managed to find a way to climb down. According to our reporting here at CNN, which is quite exceptional, which we just heard, Marco Rubio, Secretary of State, I would say quite appropriately, was right in the middle of this. So history on our side, Secretary of State leaning in. Pretty good day for diplomacy, Michael.
Nice to be able to have you here. Fingers are crossed. 2 big breaking news stories that might really alter the world picture for the better. Thank you, Admiral Stavridis.
Yeah, let me put one more point on it before we do all those high fives. Remember, 2 months ago, we had a ceasefire where? In Gaza between Hamas and Israel. That one's falling apart. Let's hope these two stay with us. I agree completely.
Thank you, Admiral. Up ahead, if AI can do the work, should we even go to college? Should our kids even go to college? And why even pay for it? We discuss that and the growing popularity of trade schools.
Okay, you heard it first. I'm tired. Russia, Ukraine, they're putting ceasefire for 30 days. And if Russia doesn't, could be bad, yeah. This is unreal, eh? Hit me, sector, subscribe.